Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. Secure Talk is brought to you by AdeQuest, your cybersecurity and compliance partner. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I'll be your host for this episode of Secure Talk. Today, we have Jonathan Moore, who is the CTO of SpiderOak, joining us. Jonathan, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. I'm down in northern Arizona, and it actually got in the 80s, down to the 80s, which normally sounds hot, but we've been all up on the West Coast, up in the hundreds, and recently. Whereabouts you at?
I'm in Portland, Oregon, so I have experienced that firsthand.
So it was just like a week ago. We had in Seattle, it was close to 110. Did you have the similar temps down?
We were, I think, up to 116. Like, wow. It was pretty brutal when it was like a light breeze at 113, and it didn't cool you down. It just baked you. It was like you're in a convection oven.
Yeah, exactly. I think they call that the heat dome. Hopefully, it doesn't come back anytime soon. It was amazing, though. I mean, we'll get into the cybersecurity here in a second, but it was amazing that I think 2 days later it was in the 80s and it almost felt cold. It was just like, 'cause it's a 30-degree drop, right?
Yeah, I would say it's down to 70s here.
Right. Oh wow, that's very nice. So hey, I got to ask you. I mean, I saw a quote from you. I believe it was from you that said that we are failing at security at all levels. That sounds pretty dire.
I think it is.
Okay.
Right. I mean, I think that we have systematic issues with security at every level. And I mean every level, from the manufacturers, the purchasers of technology, to the incentives for the purchase of technology, to the application developers, I guess that's the manufacturers, and to law enforcement, to government. We've finally in the last, this year been starting to make some movements in the government. But, the North Korea hacked globally a lot of security researchers, but a couple of them here on the West Coast. They had a Chrome 0-day that they used to go hack other researchers who had more 0 days. They were trying to bootstrap one 0-day into a handful of them. And so we had state actors hacking private individuals in the US that had arguably, exploitable technology for military purposes. And our national response, as far as anybody I know could see, was a Twitter thread of researchers being say oh, hey, were you talking to this guy? What happened to you? And that was our response. And the people in this, as I understand, the government never reached out to them being like, hey, so you were hacked by North Korea. Everything all right? Right? That wasn't, we didn't have that, right? Mm-hmm. And, we don't have federal policies which push us towards security. We're starting. It's maybe there's a few things coming out better if we actually get a meaningful security labeling thing on software products. That would be great. But that's not here yet, and it should have existed years ago. And then go on.
No, well, I was just going to ask. I mean, we do have government agencies that are responsible for cybersecurity, but what you're advocating is a kind of more heavy-handed approach or more structured approach.
Well, I think we need a different approach.
Okay.
I mean, but even on that, we have national level response, but we still treat cybersecurity incidents when they happen as if they happened at a location, right? If your company in Seattle is breached, then you're gonna talk to the Seattle Bureau of the FBI. And now right. Maybe those actors were in China, and that Seattle Bureau of the FBI has zero tools to help you. And maybe that was your breach actually was part of another breach that also happened in Virginia at the same time, and those were connected. But you're still largely going to end up with local law enforcement responses. And the local law enforcement, and certainly as a private citizen, you get to go to the police. What are they going to do, right? We need to realize that cyber incidences don't happen at geographies. Right. And that we need a national level response to them. And so so I think there's a lot of things like that, right? We need to incentivize the purchase of high assurance cyber controls, and we need to potentially even, have disincentives for maintaining old systems which are insecure on networks. We really need to get to a point where the software we run is safe for its users and the networks it operates on. And we don't have incentives in place to do that.
I mean, part of the penalty mechanism or the stick mechanism for regulations like GDPR is that as any organization that is handling certain types of data has to maintain a certain level of security. And for example, if you don't have a patch policy, or if you are not implementing that, you could be fined. If there's a breach and it shows that you were negligent and exposed your organization to the breach, you weren't following best practices, then that could increase the chances of receiving a fine. Would something like that help?
It might. I mean, I don't think, although I really respect some of what GDPR was trying to achieve, I don't think that can be held up as a useful law. Like, it's got a bunch of problems, right? Like,
Okay.
as a non-European software development company, there's basically no way for us to comply with GDPR that we believe will have any longevity, right? There's all sorts of things you can do, but anyway, but I think you're right. Like, so having said, are you even reaching the bar of best practices, and where does negligence happen? And I think though it's still more complicated than that. I think what we probably should focus on right now more is our software supply chains and the quality of the cyber control we're providing, rather than the end businesses. Because really, this is, it's sure you should have some good practices, right?
Okay.
But those are not the core of our problem. Like, the core of our problem is the industry. The core of our problem is that we are not providing companies technologies that they could use safely.
Okay.
Right. And we've been doing this forever.
So okay. So you're advocating that we focus on the software supply chain. I see research that says most breaches are caused by some type of business email compromise. Somebody clicks on something they shouldn't.
Well, I think
talk about what you see in terms of the vulnerabilities caused by the software supply chain.
Well, I don't mean the software supply chain like in terms of like the NoPeta attack or the CC Cleaner or the more recent ones with SolarWinds. What I mean is what we're producing. And I think what you said there itself was actually really key. Somebody clicked on something they should have. We shouldn't be shipping systems to people where clicking on a link, which is an intended behavior of the software, leads to a security breach. Right? That's what I meant by we are not giving people software that they can use safely. If I have to somehow guess whether I am allowed to use an intentional functionality of the software, I have to guess whether that's going to compromise security or not. That seems like the industry's failing.
Wow, I would agree with you, because sometimes it's really easy to spot these phishing emails, and sometimes it's not so easy. And if you're in a hurry and you are not in the industry, and for whatever reason, you're going to click once in a while. You're right.
If it's spear phishing, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
If it's a watering hole attack, how are you supposed to protect against that, right? This is a site that you use every day, and somebody's compromised that site, and you lose, right? And I think that it's fundamentally, we're still writing software the same way we started writing software in the 60s or 70s, and we haven't really made a change at scale. I mean, there's certainly people doing it to move away from that approach. Right. And even and where we are moving away in some narrow areas, like if you look at people who invested a lot in security, like say the Chrome team, right? They're sort of realizing that they need to just not have bugs because mitigations aren't working. Right. They're important. Sandboxing is important. Mitigations are important. They raise the bar a bit. And sandboxing in particular, I think, is pretty valuable. But in the end, we need there to not be bugs that are exploitable. I mean, bugs are the way, are the first, bugs are the currency of exploitation, right? I mean, not all of it. It's true. I mean, well, I guess it depends how you want to look at it, right? You could say that it's a bug that I can download a Trojan and run it on my computer, right?
Right.
You know, like I think the Fin7 group, which was a very successful, financial crime group, right? Their entire operational plan was get the person to download the malware. They didn't use any 0 days or exploits. They exploited the weaknesses inherent in the architecture of the operating system, not any bugs, and in people, right? They would
Yep.
spend a lot of time working with people and getting them to download the thing and do it. And you just got spear phishing is hard tech, and you've just got to make it clear in the person's mind that if they don't take the action you want to, that it is going to harm their chances of completing their duties at their job, and they're absolutely going to do it, right? That's the thing about any security control we put in place, which gets in the way of doing somebody's job. They're going to go around that control, right? We tell people you're going to get fired if you don't do this. Certainly, they're going to, if you don't deliver the report, you're fired, right? Of course, you're going to do whatever it takes to deliver the report.
So as companies are increasingly moving to the cloud, and we're kind of in many instances outsourcing a lot of our security work to the cloud providers, Azure, Google, AWS. What vulnerabilities do you see, or what problems do you see with that?
Well, I mean, I think it's a positive and negative there, right? So if you're a small organization that can't afford a SOC, right, you're doing much better by going to them in many ways, right? Because they have one, and they have great security teams, and they're doing a great job of keeping adversaries out of their infrastructure in terms of outside of the intended controls. The downside, of course, is that you are depending on this other party, and that if anybody internally gets breached, that's going to be a problem, right? I mean, the going way back, I think it was called the November Rain attack breach, which was China breaching Google to read dissident emails.
Mm-hmm.
That breach, and I don't have any inside knowledge of this, but I pay attention, and that pretty clearly seemed like what that actually was is a breach of their lawful intercept interface on Gmail, and not actually a breach of Google. So that somebody used credentials to gain access to the lawful intercept interface and just used that to read whatever they wanted. And so by going to that point, you created a sort of very high value target for the adversary that made it worth their time to get the breach to happen. And that breach, again, it doesn't even have to be that you had a bug in your security. It can be people as well. And I think also the complexity of those systems is high. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of security controls in AWS, and it can be very hard to configure and use them correctly. And I think that sort of it's not, I think, cloud per se, which is dangerous. I mean, it has risks, but you're trusting a lot more people when you go to a cloud thing, and that it's a common problem across all levels, but is because of the flexibility of cloud and how much it's grown and how well it's sort of starting to fit into enterprise needs, meaning adding more and more options. The complexity of our security is so high, it's not easy to use safely. And I think in many ideas, just from my perspective, we really need to make a shift that doesn't that allows cloud to be even safer, which is to move away from network-based controls to database controls, and that is really a move to cryptography from application or network level controls, right? So end-to-end is an example of this, right? When I send a message on Signal, right, that message is encrypted on my device and is not decrypted and not able to be decrypted until it receives the intended recipient devices. And so we're able to use cryptography here to put the controls around the data itself instead of putting it at the network. And even zero knowledge, or not zero trust networking or Zero Trust security is just moving the network perimeter around the application instead of the organization. And that's a great move, and I encourage people to do it. There's a lot of benefits, but in the end, you've still got that whole application running on the server that you have to trust, and that's another high-value target and more attack surface. If you move that security all the way to the edges, that problem goes away. So I think that there's value in cloud, but in centralized security models, there's a lot of risk.
Well, doesn't SpiderOak, I mean, part of the services that you provide relate to protecting data, right?
Yeah, we do exactly that same thing as Signal does. And I use Signal because it's an example that more people understand. But we do that, but solve a big problem that the existing end-to-end market doesn't solve, which is how do you actually do policy and controls in that environment in a way that works for businesses? Like if you're using, by policy or, just in practice, a tool like Signal to provide, to do your secure mobile comms, and you have an employee who exits and they're in 5 Signal groups, what do you want to bet a year later they're still going to be in 3? Because it doesn't have any management tools for that, which is why I think what we're doing is taking that same concept and then adding a decentralized authority model on top of it so that you can exit that person from all of the groups and teams they're in a single go and allow user management and onboarding. And so we're really focused on how do we take these great concepts of end-to-end or data-oriented security and make it applicable for business.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that we do is a variety of network scans to evaluate potential security risks, but we also look at total cost of ownership, and you can see how many servers you have, and how fully optimized they are, et cetera. And every time that we do this, let's just say that it's a 1,000-seat organization, we will find anywhere from 5 to 7 up to 10% of the credentials are that are still quote unquote active for people who've left the organization. Sometimes they've been gone for as long as 3 to 4 or 5 years, right? And it's just there's a huge gap there. And if you can, obviously there are tools out there that solve it. And then if you're talking about solving it in an end-to-end way, that's pretty cool and pretty necessary, I guess. So maybe could you walk us through a fuller scenario of some of the services you provide with your customers? So like, hey, we helped this organization do ABC.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to talk about specific organizations.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to give any names. Yeah,
yeah, the kind of things that we do. So we actually, we have a actually fairly long-standing product that's been around the market for 13 or 15 years, which offers backup, right? We have an enterprise, consumer, and SMB products. And that product, the value of that product is that the data is all encrypted at the endpoints before they send it to us. But we do it in a way that we can still sort of efficiently sync just the files you need if you want to recover them, or the entire file system. But the key is that, or no pun intended, the important point is that we don't hold the keys to decrypt that content. So we don't have to worry. Sorry, that was my cat. We don't have to worry about a breach of our organization, personnel or technical, leading to a breach of our users' data that they've entrusted with us. But what's great, that's great about that product, but what it doesn't do is collaboration. And so what we're really selling these days more now is our collaboration products. And we offer this both as sort of a platform that we can produce custom solutions for as a service, and we have some customers we're doing that for, and as well as a turnkey solution for collaboration. And so the turnkey solution does chat and file sharing. So you can kind of think of it as, what if WhatsApp or Signal or one of these end-to-end chat apps added Slack-like features and Dropbox-like features to kind of, and brought that all in one experience, but kept everything end to end, and then added that sort of group level control. So we have concepts of teams and groups and admins and team admins and policy and all that kind of stuff. So where people are finding that really valuable is that many organizations start with their security by putting a physical perimeter around their network. They put a fence, they put a building with walls and locked doors, and they start the security there. And then they're asked, look, well, now you've got to go operate out in the field. So how do you do that? You know, how do you secure those devices when your first step is secure the perimeter? And so some people opt to try and do VPNs, but that often ends up being a not very flexible solution. Or what if you need to operate in a geographic region where you can't trust the provider, network providers, you know? And so that's another area that people are finding compelling. And then additionally, you know, when you adopt us, if you're a smaller organization, again, like it's great, you can use a cloud solution and just trust the cloud, but you can adopt us in that same level and not have to trust the cloud either. So and a big part of our goal too is enabling users sort of to empower the users with the data in the place they want to use it. So you don't create that friction that causes people to go around the security controls your organization has put in place. So we're trying to like serve a couple of needs here. We're trying to serve for people that have decided they need end-to-end cryptographic security, provide them the controls that they need. We're trying to provide people who want to go even further and say, we need that security because we don't trust the infrastructure. And we're also trying to help on the side of, hey, I just want to enable my users to get things done and give them flexibility, but still maintain sort of at an administrative level positive control over the data, even if I don't fully control the devices that they're using the data on. Does that answer your question? It's kind of
no, absolutely, and I think that it totally makes sense. It's a very attractive solution. My only reluctance would be that because you basically you're replicating the functionality of a lot of very strong players in the market, like Teams, like Slack, etc. And so I can see that would be a challenge because people are like, oh, do we want to adopt yet another tool, right? And then but it depends on what is, if the priority is on security. Of course, those tools have some level of security built in there, but if you really want that end to end, this sounds like the great way to go.
Yeah, I mean, if you adopt, I mean, like those are all great tools, right? And we do not claim to stand toe to toe to them on features, right? But there are a lot of environments where those tools, people are choosing to adopt other tools. Why are people doing business on WhatsApp, right? Why are people doing business on Signal? They've made a choice to do business with another tool that offers a different security posture. And we see those people and say, let us help you get to the point, let us help you by giving you that same security posture for providing you the business controls that you actually need, because there's gaps in the controls those provide. They provide some controls very strongly, and others just don't even exist in the product because they're not actually made for businesses. They're made for consumers. They're great products. I use Signal all the time to talk to my family. That's the app that I talk to with my child going to college, with my parents, and with most of my friends. But it's not a tool that's great for our company, and we don't use it at our company as an official tool or in much scope at all.
No, it totally makes sense. Hey, let me ask you. Let's change the conversation a bit here. I mean, because you know a lot about security. You know a lot about the different vulnerabilities out there. Let's say you have a friend, they're not in the security business at all. Just somebody that you grew up with, you're having a cup of coffee, and he says, I'm concerned about my personal data. What should I do? What are the first couple things that any individual should be doing?
Well, I mean, I guess I would probably ask them what data they're concerned about, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and I would probably honestly tell them the first thing they should do is be using cloud native stuff, because the most likely way they're going to lose their data is dropping their laptop, in the river, right? Or bathtub or whatever, right? data availability is actually probably their highest risk. Then I think, after that, be really careful about what applications you install, right? And, if you care about your privacy, communicate with end-to-end secure apps. I think for an individual and their family, I think Signal is an often approach. If you have an organization that needs to get stuff done, I think we offer a really compelling solution for that. But use unique passwords, just the same basic. There's all the basic things people say, right? Don't reuse passwords, patch, yada yada, right? But I think beyond that, I would say, be careful what you install. Like, so much of this, random software you install is actually out to get you.
Can you give an example?
I don't know. There's, all sorts of like adware that's out to get you. And, then in the end, also there's all of these random apps that keep popping up in app stores that turn out to be credential stealing. Apps that if you download are Trojan to steal your banking credentials. Right now, as an individual, the criminals aren't really after your data, they're after your money. And so they might try and ransomware you, they might try and steal your banking credentials, probably both at the same time. They might just try and steal your credentials to try and do a scam, one of these like, help, I'm stuck at a foreign airport and need $500 right now scams that are popular through Facebook.
Yep.
Those are the kind of risks you really face as an individual, and losing your data.
Do you still worry about apps if you get it from a reputable source? For example, the Apple App Store. Would you still be cautious?
Yeah, I go through and regularly remove apps I haven't used in a while off of my devices, and then that's starting to become built into operating systems. Modern Android is like, hey, you haven't used these apps for a while, I'm disabling them. And I think that's a great posture to have. But it's something I've done for years, and I think people should really consider. If you have an app that's auto-updating or auto-starting and you're not using it, delete it. It's just a risk for you.
Good advice. Let's take the same question and apply it to a different scenario. You've got somebody they've just moved into a CISO role for a medium-sized organization. Let's say 500 to 1,000 people organization. They're new in the role. What's the first three things that they should be looking at?
Well, I gotta be honest, I'm an application security person more than an InfoSec person. So I don't think I'm going to have a fairly great answer for you that. I could talk to you about equivalent question if you moved into an application security role.
Well, let's do that.
Right. All right. So you're moving into application security. The first thing you should do is understand how you're managing your dependencies. Right. That's a really important thing. You should make sure that if you're using unsafe languages, what are your coding practices, and how are you managing sort of risk for using those unsafe languages, and what's your overall security posture and mitigation approaches? How are you making sure you don't implement a file traversy and kind of directory traversal vulnerability? So like, I think a lot is just to gain awareness of what you're doing and awareness of what people are doing. So it's not really that different than I assume what the InfoSec is. The first thing is just to understand the landscape and awareness and what the organization's practices are. I think long-term, what you're going to want to do is get all those things buttoned down, make sure that you understand your dependencies, make sure that you're monitoring whether there's breaches in any of those dependencies so that you're not part of one of these, underscore JS kind of vulnerabilities, and they've happened in Python and other languages as well. And in the end, what you really want to get to is an architecture where you separate out the the controls in your application from the business functionality, so that you can isolate that, so that you're, why is it that a bug in my JPEG parser lets that code open a socket and read my file system, right? That's sort of the architectural flaw of ambient authority, the object capability people call it, where there's just authority in the environment. And what you really want to move to is separating out that authority so that only places that really need it. And I believe that the right place for that is that you need to separate controls from functional logic so that bugs in functional logic can't escalate privilege.
Makes a lot of sense. Hey, let me ask you this. Where do you go to kind of keep learning or stay ahead of the curve or stay aware of best practices related to application security? I mean, you're responsible for the technical development of your company's services. How do you kind of keep abreast of what are some of the latest trends or best practices?
I think in my case, I find, I read a lot, so it's just reading is really important. And I find that a well-groomed set of followers on Twitter is actually where most of the interesting InfoSec stuff happens. Like you hear about stuff days ahead of time it's landing in the news, and you hear about a lot of stuff that nobody would ever report on because it's not interesting. So I think as a happenstance of history that finding good people to follow on Twitter is one of the best ways to hear about the latest trends and ideas and what's happening.
I think that's some good advice as well. Well, hey, Jonathan, I have enjoyed this conversation. I think we could probably go down. Well, actually, we could go back to what we started with, and you could talk a little bit about how the government is kind of failing us in terms of providing Go ahead.
But it's not just the government, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, it's also, it's also that people developing software aren't providing secure solutions. I suppose there's an incentive problem there, right? Like I said, in the end, the purchasers of software can't evaluate security of software. And the manufacturers have externalized their risk to software. Like if it doesn't cause physical harm or property damage, then software manufacturers don't bear the burden of the risk. If I install a piece of software from you and that ends up being due to a breach and I lose $100,000, your liability is nothing, right? Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that there's some reputational risk that obviously if for example, that wasn't Slack, Zoom had the issue with the Zoom bombing, right? And
yep.
and their business took a hit, and Microsoft Teams, conversely, arguably benefited from that. And so there is an incentive for these applications to I guess ship secure products, but not to the degree where somebody's going to come back and hold them liable. At least I haven't seen that.
They only need to be as secure as the next guy, right? And nobody's terribly secure right now. So the incentives we put in place around reputational incentives aren't really driving the market forward fairly quick. Are not driving the market forward very quickly. And I think we really need some other shifts to do that. And part of the problem is that purchasers in the end want to buy something they can just sprinkle on their compute infrastructure and make everything secure. And I think that's just never going to work because, in reality, they probably need to change their operations. And we've seen that happen before, right? Before ransomware, nobody really was very good at backup and restore. And now a lot of people are because they saw that as an operational change they could do to mitigate the risk of ransomware. And I think with now other kinds of ransomware risks and other actors, hopefully that will push people to make operational changes. But I think the one we need is compartmentalization to get rid of this sort of ambient authority, not just in applications, but across the network and the organization. So I think part of the problem is people don't want to change the way they do things, but they actually need to. We need to change the architectures of software. We need to change how we use software in organizations. We kind of need different software that lets us have different operational stances where we don't just freely share information with everybody across the organization. We need to make it easy to do so when it's important for the job, but we don't want to make that the default.
Yeah, and one of the changes I'd like to see is just getting rid of passwords altogether. I mean, it's just like,
oh, absolutely. I've long been on a mission to kill passwords. Our software doesn't use passwords. We use client-based keys for everything, but we found a way to make that very easy and make onboarding actually the next onboarding flow we're releasing in a month or two, makes the onboarding flow almost exactly what you're used to, of getting your temporary username and password and a host to log into. It has that same feel, that flow, but manages to do everything with key-based security instead of password-based security.
That sounds great. Hey, so if any of our listeners, they wanted to get more information about SpiderOak, or if there's any events or news that they should be aware of, could you share that with us?
Yeah, generally, you should just go to our website. That's where you can find out the most information about us. I think if you're interested in the kind of approach to security we have, you should really watch our product. We're just sort of have a kind of early release of this product, our cross-clave collaboration product to the market, and you're going to see a lot of new features and a lot of ease of use improvements in that over the next year. And I'd really encourage people to see what we're doing and follow along and tell us, what would make the product better for them.
Excellent. Well, I'll put links or a link to your website there in the description for this podcast. Hey, Jonathan, it's been great talking with you. I wish you and the SpiderOak team a great second half of 2021, and I will keep in touch with you.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.